Our first stop on New Zealand's North Island was the city of Wellington. Arriving in town early, we headed to the Te Papa Museum, only to learn that it wasn't open yet. So we took a stroll through their garden walk.
Today we're scheduled for the half-day Weta Workshop's There and Back Again tour. But still having some time to burn, we walk along the pedestrian mall, taking in a few of the shops. The Weta Workshop is well known for its work on Lord of the Rings, but it's been around for a lot longer than that, getting its start in the 80s, and I was surprised at how many of the current films they have their fingers in. Our tour starts at Weta Cave, their souvenir shop and small museum. Unfortunately, we had very little time before our tour, and there's a strict no cameras policy through most of it. Here in the model shop, they are putting together some of the props for one of their latest films.
The cool thing about the details, though, is that the human brain only takes 1/10 of a second just to decide if what it's looking at is real. And in that 10th of a second, all it needs is details. Now, the coolest part is that the details don't have to be right, So you have a look at this piece here, and see all that, you think, oh yeah, that looks like a peel, But all of that is that's rubbish. It doesn't do anything. It serves no purpose.
Next, we walked over to the Te Papa Museum, whose collections were rather extensive. Having only an hour and 15 minutes, we started with the Maori history exhibits. The most interesting were an intricately carved wooden canoe and a replica of a meeting house. We hurried through the early European settlers and the natural history exhibits. There we saw more stuffed Kiwi birds. We still haven't seen a live one.
The Weta Workshop is named after this insect. It is Maori for little monster, and that's how Weta got its start, making monsters. One of the most moving exhibits was one depicting the Battle of Gallipoli. It features figures made by the Weta Workshop of people frozen in dramatic moments. And what heightens the drama is the size of these sculptures. After leaving the Te Papa Museum, we finished our day in Wellington with a walk along the waterfront. Passing by an ice cream stand, we couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a last-minute treat. The next morning we're in the town of Napier, which has a very unique feeling. In 1934, most of the city was destroyed by a large earthquake and was rebuilt in the current style of the time, and they now consider themselves the Art Deco capital of the world. Since then, they've kept that architectural style alive, and any new building built has to have some sort of tie to the Art Deco style of the 30s.
Some of our group had slept through their alarm, so we had time to stroll through the lovely gardens by the ocean front.
As we were walking, Marianne noticed something on the ground. Taking a closer look, it was two baby birds huddled together on the sidewalk. They weren't disturbed by our approach, and they seemed healthy, so we let them be. We did check on them a little later, and they were gone. Today's plans call for us to head up into the mountains for a whitewater rafting trip on the Mohaka River. Our guide told us that the large earthquake here raised the land 5.5 feet, making the wharf too shallow for most ships, and exposed a large tract of land that used to be a bay and is now used for an airport and farming. After a stop to pick up our rafts and put on our wetsuits, we were back on the road again, heading toward the river.
This was described as a whitewater rafting trip, but it was really just a float trip down the river. We were a little disappointed by how calm the river was, but the scenery and weather was nice, so we just enjoyed the trip. After about 2 hours, our rafting adventure was over. On the riverbank where we pulled out, they had provided us with a nice picnic lunch.
On our way back, we stopped for some sightseeing, including this nice view of our ship.
It is time to say goodnight to Napoli. It's hard for us to whisper Buena Sera. Full moon above the Mediterranean Sea. In the morning, Signorina will go walking. Where the mountains help the sun come into view. A little jewelry shop will stop and linger. I'll buy a wedding ring for your finger. In the meantime, let me tell you that I love you. Buena Sera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight.
Today we're docked at Port Taronga in the nice resort town of Mount Maunganui. We had a few minutes to browse the town and bought a small Kiwi figure, which incorporated paua, a local abalone-type shell. We could have used more time in town, as there was also a weekend market happening.
The first stop on our tour today is going to take us to a kiwi farm. The kiwi, or more accurately the Chinese gooseberry, got its name because of taxes. Apparently berries have a tariff on them, but call it a kiwi, no tax.
So on our right we have got a male plant row, and on our left we have got the female, and the female is growing the big canes up. These are going to become the ribs, so if you can see the row is your spine, and then these become like the ribs coming off that spine. This little baby, this little girl has got one fruit on her. So she is just very young. The gold has no hair on its skin. It's like clean shaven. This is gold. Now, this one is a reject because it's like 2 flowers in one. It's called a fan. And what they're trying to do is grow a crop of good size, good shape. What they have done here, on that stump of the vine, we cut out green. We cut it off some years ago, and we grafted on 2 gold canes. Now, the rings on it, the girdling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is its 9th crop it's carried. We've got the green here. Now the green, you can see is hairy. These vines, see how fat those trunks are? They are over 30, if not getting close to 40-year-old vines. Alright, you'll notice that we have got lines around the trunk. We call that girdling. Now they do that late in the season to finish off the fruit. The leaves are doing their job of photosynthesis, and normally it goes down to the roots. If we girdle the vine, it gets to that point it cannot go, it must come back up and out, and it goes into the fruit. So what they call finishing it off. So when do we pick? It's all to do with the sugar level of the fruit. And we need cold autumn nights to boost that sugar in the fruit, because without it, That fruit will not ripen once it comes out of cold storage. It stays a rock hard bullet in the fruit bowl. It is immature.
A bullet in the fruit bowl.
It is, you like that. So, last year, ironically, the first ship for the first time went to China. So we are selling kiwi fruit back to China. You see the irony of that?
Yeah.
The little special boats for it come and go. They fill up there. They cannot have fumes. So it's electronic ships, because the fumes will ripen the fruit. There is so much goes on behind the scenes, so you guys can eat kiwi fruit.
Here we got to sample the two different kind of kiwis, the original green and the new fuzzless golden one. We found the new golden variety to be sweeter, but we actually liked the tartness of the original green.
As we drove up for lunch in Rotorua, we saw this open-air market. Not being able to pass it up, we ducked out of eating with the rest of the group. After wandering around for a while and talking with the local woodturner, we found some great fish and chips.
Rotorua is known for its hot springs, and this beautiful museum is actually housed in an old bathhouse. Unfortunately, it's closed since it doesn't meet current earthquake standards. The rest of our afternoon will be spent here at the Tapua Maori Cultural Center and its geothermal area home to the Pahutu Geyser.
Maori people, it's a name being given to them for the local people who are here. We've got some who've got the green eyes, and they have got their ancestry linked back to South America. Okay, via the Easter Islands and across and down. We've got some Maori with the red hair, which we think we have got ancestry back to Europe somewhere along the lines. But on the whole, the Maori people DNA matches the natives of southern Taiwan. So they've come down through the Philippines, out across, and they talk about Hawaiki. There's some link to Hawaii apparently. But the migration, they say there were 9 big canoes who came down, and the people from this canoe, the Arawa canoe, their tribal group is Arawa. We had no metal, they had no pottery. So they were deemed to be a Stone Age civilization.
Also at the Cultural Center is a Maori meeting house, where we're going to see a welcoming ceremony along with other Maori dances.
Another way in which we interpret the words that we sing is with this implement here, the poi, a ball on the end of a piece of twine that we the ladies twirl and beads on the back and palm of the hand.
Also located here at Tapua is the thermal hot springs area.
Bus, right?
Yes. The main geyser only erupts once every couple of hours, and our guide tried to time it so we can see it before we left.
Okay, so we walked past that and I got a bit dampened. We walked around the hillside and we watched this other one, which didn't seem quite so impressive. That one stopped playing a couple of years after I saw it as a child. Down below us, we've got some mud volcanoes, but I love the little one that's looking like an upside down ice cream cone at the moment. This is the first year I've ever seen one of those form here. I might just come over to your here to see what I'm talking about. That little ice cream cone, the upside down one. Little green thing. Can you see? It's going to have a little eruption. Some days it's very small, it only goes for seconds, and some days it come up quite high.
Oh yeah, right here.
So it's only a very short cycle, but it plays often. Some days it has a holiday. And it's all about natural pressuring. So we've got the indicator guys are going. Still nothing out of the big one. That's my that one day at the office. Always go. No bad day at the office. There you go.
Okay, I need it.
Too bad there's a breeze. Otherwise,
On our way out, we laid down on some thermally heated slabs of rock. They were very hot to the touch, but laying down on them they were tolerable for a short period of time.
From our balcony, we had a nice view of the town of Mount Maunganui. Overall, our guide Christina made this our favorite stop so far.
Our first of 2 days in Auckland starts off with a 90-minute Auckland Harbor cruise, which gives us wonderful views of the city, including the impressive Sky Tower.
Next to it is an Irish yacht.
This pod, located under the Auckland Harbor Bridge, is for bungee jumping, something we passed on for this trip. Our tour ended with a ferry ride to the small community of Devonport, just across the harbor from Auckland, where we spent a relaxing afternoon, stopping off at a local market to pick up some cheese and cider for a picnic lunch.
Back in the city, we walked by the Sky Tower on the way to the Auckland Art Museum. It very definitely was a poofter and not worth the effort of climbing the hill to get to it. There were several odd exhibits, including one called the Obliteration Room, where you could put some colored stickers on the walls and furnishings. It was weirdly stupid and only accomplished there being stickers on the floors throughout the museum.
The next day we're back in the countryside, heading toward Hobbiton, the movie set of the Shire from Tolkien's Middle-earth. We start off in the Shire's Rest, the crowded gift shop.
That's where Gandalf is riding in on the horse and cart, and he meets up with Frodo. And Frodo jumps up and says to Gandalf, "You're late." To which Gandalf responds with, "A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." And of course they have a bit of a chuckle. Frodo jumps into the horse and cart with Gandalf, and they continue on their journey into Hobbiton.
We can officially welcome everyone into Hobbiton. So hey, right. So the orange hobbit hole that we're currently standing in front of, this is an example of a 60%. So these we use for actors such as Sir Ian McKellen that plays Gandalf. So standing in front of this door, he'd look nice and tall and look like he towered over all the hobbits and all the hobbit holes we do have around here on the set. Now the 90% we use for actors such as Elijah Wood. So of course he'd stand in front of those doors and look nice and small and look the appropriate size that a hobbit should be living here in Hobbiton. Well, in a few minutes guys we will be at that hobbit hole that we can go inside of. But before we get there, I'm sure you're starting to get a little bit curious about what exactly is inside of every single hobbit hole. Yeah, getting some ideas? Well, you'll be very happy to hear then that we have a very exciting nothing inside of every single hobbit hole. Now the reason for this is because all of the interior filming, it was done in Wellington in Stone Street Studios. So that is the production company that Peter Jackson himself does own. So much like all the Hobbit Hole doors that we'll be looking at today, we had two different interiors. So we had a 60% and we had a 90% interior. So this meant that the props were different sizes. So once again, we could easily make the actors look the appropriate size of either a wizard or a hobbit once more. So this does mean that in that Hobbit Hole that we will be going into, the only thing you'll find in there is a very exciting retaining wall and a dirt ground. But regardless, you can still get some fantastic pictures and of course trick everyone back home and make them nice and jealous. What we're going to do first, we're going to start to make our way up this hill. Now once we get to the top of the hill, if you have a look around at the scenery and the landscape, you'll start to notice the three things that attracted Peter Jackson and his team to the Alexander's property. Now the very first thing that Peter Jackson fell in love with was our party tree, sitting directly in the middle of the set. Now this tree itself, it's about 120 years old, and it's almost identical to the one that's described in the book, where Bilbo Baggins celebrates his 111th birthday. Now finally, having a look around, you'll see the rolling green hills and the Kaimai ranges. So it's these three things all together made the Alexander's property perfect location to become Hobbiton.
It's amazing the detail they have put into this. It makes it truly magical. One bit of movie magic is the tree above Bag End, Bilbo Baggins' Hobbit Hole at the top of the hill. It's fake, consisting of 3,760,000 artificial leaves, all hand-painted.
Next, we're going to start to make our way down towards the Green Dragon pub. So down there, that's where everyone's going to be getting a complimentary drink, and you do have the option of 4 drink choices. So what we have for you today is a dark stout. We then have an amber ale. We also have a non-alcoholic ginger beer or an alcoholic apple cider.
Beer and an amber ale.
Again, the detail here at the Green Dragon Inn is just incredible. Over the bar is a large carving of a green dragon, donated by Peter Jackson, who had it carved by a retired Maori artist. Our tour also included a Hobbit-themed buffet lunch. We're back driving through the countryside. Our next stop, the Waitomo Glowworm Caves. The caves have been owned and run by the New Zealand government for many years, but just recently have been returned to the Maori. Under their control, it has been refurbished and expanded into a large recreational area. The caves are home to thousands of bioluminescent glowworms, with the highlight being a short boat ride through a glowworm grotto. The tour was very interesting, but like a lot of places we've been to, no photos allowed inside. Our last stop in New Zealand was to be Waitangi, Bay of Islands. But the weather wasn't cooperating, and it was too windy for us to enter the bay. So it's 3 days at sea as we head back to Australia.